Hello and welcome to subpart 6.1 of the BMS Modding tutorial series. In this video I will show you how you can add a new aircraft to the database. I will use the EF 2000 data mod for Falcon BMS 4.38 update 1 hotfix 1 as a baseline. I've already added the Italian single seat variant, and I will now add the Spanish single seat variant of the Eurofighter Typhoon aircraft. So let's get started. This video will be a little bit compressed to avoid it to become too long, and some specific subject matters will be covered in separate videos in some greater detail. So, okay, the first thing we need is the model. In this case, I have one primary external 3D model for the Spanish single seat variant that I have already added as folder number, model folder number 11023. That's important. Generally spoken, you can use any folder number you want in theory as long as it's not already in use. Same applies to textures under Korea OBJ, and here we also have the appropriate textures for the Spanish variant already added. I see them here. These four, because we have two skin sets and they are assigned to the model under model folder 11023, so this part is already done. It's a BML version 1 model, therefore we have textures herein. As explained in previous videos, for BML version 2 models you would have the textures directly included in the model folder itself. So we will start with a database part. So for this I have opened the editor already. In this case we want to simplify it a bit. We have the Italian Typhoon variant, for example, here. So I will use it as a baseline for the Spanish single seat variant. Detail edits will be done in the retrospect. So we start simply creating a copy of the Italian single seat variant. It asks me whether to also duplicate the class table record, so we confirm this. Now we have here at the top is a new created record entry, index number 601. We simply change the name. Can also change the description slightly. Press save for the time being. Important, the CT record is there. Okay, we can also open that one. And what I do is to capture all the data. Okay. VCD record number is now 601. I personally mark those as new in green here. In blue is updated, black is default, and unchanged. Okay. Important now here is we have already established the link, and we also need to change aircraft control data. I have already prepared the entry. In this case it's 302. We will cover it quickly soon. For here it's important that you assign a specific number that's not being used by the airplane, in this case subtype fighter bomber combination. So I have checked out which ones are in use. We can briefly do this just for illustrative purposes. Here at the top you can filter. We are looking for vehicles aircraft. or airplane in this case, it's called that way. So we now check out the subtype. And looking for fighter bomber because we have just created a fighter bomber. So we go down and we see the last fighter bomber type. It's F-35, has a specific number 77. I have elected to keep some distance for future possible updates and have assigned the 100 to the Italian and now 101 to the Spanish single-seat variant. So there's some growth potential if new aircraft are being added. Okay, so we have now created the vehicle control data and the corresponding class table record, which is a 6015. Let's briefly open it again. What's important herein is not just the specific number and that you appropriately link to the corresponding vehicle control data, that's in this case automatically done, but also the aircraft control data, and of course that's very important. You have to link to the external 3D model, which is, as explained before, 11023. So we have now this appropriate model assigned. Let's briefly check out those different aircraft control data record entries. In theory, I would have, in this case, now simply created a copy of this one to use the new one. It's already included in this case. Here we set the combat class. It's in this case F-16 type because it's fighter bomber. So if you create a new aircraft with a specific subtype, simply take a look what combat class other subtypes use. And this is essentially the AI behavior profile. In this field, you link to the aircraft data file that's already being created, but I will nevertheless cover it in a while. Here you have the sensors. In this case, it's already preset. We don't need to change this at this point in time. If you create a completely new aircraft or a variant version of another aircraft that has different sensors, it may be necessary to create new record entries for the radar warning receiver or infrared search and track sensor, and appropriately update here the index numbers. Sensors will be subject to another video in the future, so we won't dive into the details here, just to show you the process. So this is the first step. The next thing we have to do is we need to create units. We need 2 units, one for flight and one for squadrons. So what we do here is we simply take the flight from the 10 single seat variant. In this case also a CT is required, so we duplicate it. Now we have a new record entry here. Remove the dash. And what's important for the time being is that you edit these fields. So it currently points to the Italian single seat variant, but of course we want to point it to the Spanish single seat variant, so we mark that one, click on edit element. In this case I can sort by name, simply change, and that's it. You have to repeat this process until you have all vehicles covered. For flight, as you can see, it's only 4 aircraft here, 2 and 2. The rest must be filled up with 0 elements down to 15, so it's in total 16 entries here. For the flight it's very simple because we only create Z1 with the number 0 here. Now we can remove all others. And now we simply copy and paste that one until we have filled up to 15 again. Save it here. And the next step is we create squadron as well. Once again we are copying, in this case the Italian single seat variant. And here it's a little bit more work to do, because for squadrons in this case we have 18 aircraft. You can of course in theory change this. And I will now simply go through these because the elements are not completely filled up. There are gaps in between. I can't really tell what's the rationale behind this. And to avoid any possible problems, I'm simply renaming it this way, keep the order between the 2's and the 0's. As said, I'm not sure whether it's really necessary or not, or what the actual logic is behind, but to be in the safe side, it of course makes sense. Takes a while, but I do this now to have this completed. As you can see, it's always 16 entries in total. So 0 to 15. And you define the number of aircraft here with the elements. So if you edit element data, you can also see the number of elements displayed there, and you can of course change them. So we are soon finished. Okay, so that's done. We save it. What is important is we go to the class table as we have new. Now we need to select all. As we have new dedicated entries for the flight and squadron, we also need to update the specific number here. Graphics is not required in this case, as it's just the unit and not the aircraft itself, so it's not such referencing the external 3D model. Okay, now we have a specific edit. Okay, then we go back to vehicles, because from vehicles you can essentially select everything. What we see now is here we have the normal vehicle, and here we have the 2 units that we can now directly access from here. The rest of the data remain unchanged in this case, but of course if you create a new aircraft or a variant with dramatically different data, you of course need to update those data as appropriate. So we go to weapons. At the moment the aircraft is using the different slot stations for the Typhoon already. What I in this case only need to do is to assign separate weapon loadout data. Let's briefly do this. We have some spare capacity. go to hardpoints here. In this case, we sort by name and search for these 3 spares. Don't be confused about the aircraft types displayed behind. It's for whatever reason sometimes showing bullshit, so to speak. Let's now call it EF SP OWP, that's the outboard wing pylon. Second one becomes a center wing pylon, and the third one is inward wing pylon. So we can in principle now already edit the quantities and weapons, but we do it later on. It's not important at the moment. What's important is that we appropriately assign the respective stations. So if you create a new aircraft, you would have, of course, to add a gun first by add weapon, and then slot 0 is created, and you select the gun and here you set the gun rounds. As already explained in subpart 5.4. And with add hardpoint, you are adding the hardpoints. In this case, the Typhoon has 12 hardpoints, not the real aircraft, but as it's implemented. So we keep the slot 1, which equates to the integrated tips stub pylon launcher, so the most outboard underwing pylon. The GAS in this name, I have named this way because it indicates it's applicable to German, Italian and Spanish aircraft. Same for the fuselage station units here. All implies it's applicable to all aircraft. Same for slot 6, all is applicable to all Typhoon variants, at least among the core nations. Same for FLIR, that one is not available in German aircraft, for example. So all that we need to change in this respect are the inner wing pylons, IWP, center wing pylons, and outboard wing pylons. Of course, you have to repeat this process for left and right rings. That's important, not to forget about it. Otherwise, you have mixed load ups, and that's of course something that you want to avoid, but it's very easy and quick to change, so it's no problem. If you make an error, you can easily fix it this way. So okay, so we have already changed it. In theory, we could now also adjust the loadouts from here by, for example, clicking on the slot, click on view, and now you can change it. In this case, we have the data not properly saved. That's why it doesn't work. First need to save to ensure that the data are saved. Now we have the correct one, and the weapon loadout should be different. So we simply mark it. Okay, it's now outboard wing pylon. It's of course not a loadout that we want. Let's just, for illustrative purposes, change it. So we want an AIM 9L, for example. Replace the targeting pot with IRIS-T. That one. Now we have these weapons assigned to the outboard wing pylon. There will be other weapons added later on. I just don't want to waste too much of your time. So we now have, as we can see, the wrong slot located here. Should of course read Spanish outboard wing pylon, or not Italian. And the name here displayed and also the appropriate weapon load data numbers indicate it's the same record entry assigned to two different stations. So you only need to change the weapon loadout once for the weapon load data record entry and can assign it appropriately to different stations as you like. So, and that's already the key part on the database. Here, as said, we have no new sensors created. Sensors are part of avionics and will be covered in a separate video. I have used some of the existing weapon load data from other variants. And of course, even if you create an all new aircraft and add it to the database, it definitely makes sense to select an aircraft that comes most closely to it and copy paste it, because you get a lot of data already populated, especially with regard to the class table record entries. That's important for the type. Okay, let's now briefly take a look at the aircraft sim data and a brief check of and update of these data. It's up to you whether you create your own configuration matrix or not. I do this because it eases keep on track what you are actually doing. The other ones will be captured later on. Apart from these, which are the same. And the other three will be added later. Okay, so now we go to the sim folder, AC data, and here you need to add your flight model. In this case, it's already in. I've called it EF 2000 SS TXT PB. What's important is that if you create a new aircraft data file, you also need to update the AC types LST, the list file. And to do so, you need to increment by 1 here, because you are adding one file, and ideally add it to the bottom. It's exactly the name of the txt pb file, but you don't need the file ending, but the entry here must match the name of the txt pb file itself. There must be no deviation. It must be one-to-one the same. Otherwise it wouldn't work, and as shown you can easily select it. Here under aircraft control data, aircraft data, you can select all those files that are included in the AC types list file. So that's important in order for the database to read it. You need to have included it before opening the database. Okay, in this case we have made no changes. For the cockpit part, refer to part 8.0 of this BMS Modding tutorial series, where I show you the basics about 3D cockpits and also how to transfer a cockpit or add a cockpit to a particular database. It's not an overly complicated process if you have one readily available. So refer to that video. And now comes the part that the majority of people is probably not aware, and that's the actual implementation of the aircraft. So under Art you have the main folder, and herein there are a lot of files, and two of them are of particular interest for us. The first one is a text IDS. So this is very important. Each aircraft, but also a lot of other text objects, have an identity. That's this number. And if you want to add an aircraft, you need to add the aircraft text with a unique number that's not already being used. In this case, I've already prepared it. So once again, leaving a gap between the last one so that I'm able, in case of new aircraft being added with a future update, I can simply adopt these data without overwriting and editing anything. So I've started with the Italian variant with text ID 700. In this case, the Spanish variant is the 701. You can name it as you want. I tried to keep a consistent naming convention. So that entry here is very important because you need it in other files as well. And of course, this number is also being called up somewhere, and we will now continue. I leave that one open, just minimize it. The second entry is that you need are the units, and here you are defining the name. So I've already provisionally added it here. So that's now the name that will be displayed in the tactic engagement mode, and also in the dogfight list if you add the aircraft to the respective game modes. And as you can see here, that's the text name that we have defined in the text IDS ID file here. Okay. And it must match. If you make an error here, then it does not work. So we don't necessarily need to keep it open. The other one not either, because I have already added it. What's important in this respect is that under Art you also have the underscore FHD, and you need to do the same edits here under main as well. So these files are duplicated, but care must be applied if there are any possible differences in these files, and this may happen. I haven't checked it out in this case. Just to be on the safe side, it may make sense to manually edit these files instead of just copy pasting. You can of course, before you do any edits, compare these files. When they are one-to-one the same, then you can of course simply copy paste one from another, either from the underscore FHD main to the normal main or vice versa. In this case we have it already included as well here, and the same is also true for text IDS, this file. So here is a 701 that we have assigned. It's already included here. I've manually edited it, and as you can see, also provisions for the Austrian single seat, which will be the next aircraft. So the next part is a dogfight. You also need to do it twice under art DGFT and under art underscore FHD DGFT. Okay, DGFT for dogfight. Here you have the user IDS, and you must add the aircraft here as well. So it ends here. And it's now very important to also add the aircraft here. I have not added the Italian variant thus far, so we will just do it. Was forgotten. So EF2K IT. Let's complete it. Once again, I leave some space in case that future aircraft are being added. The next tire is 21,800, so I will simply choose something in between. Take it, copy paste it. For the Spanish variant, that becomes number 1, and we can, where we are, that also provisionally add the Austrian single seat variant. Save it here. I will now simply copy and paste it under art dgtf, and here we have the same file. Repeat it here. Here I have already added it. So okay, that one was forgotten under underscore FHD. So we have this one added, and now the final part is we want to add it to the tactical engagement mode. Is we go to campaign and search for the TE planes list file. That's actually that one. We scroll down to the EF2000 variants we have, and this this. I will simply copy and paste and only update individual data, but I show you how the logic here works. At the top there is a type, the subtype, and the specific numbers that you can appropriately extract from the database, and more specifically from the class table record entry. So that one is 6015 in this case. We open it, and here you see type 1, subtype 7, specific 101. So we have already 1 and 7, need to update here. Then there's a unit subtype. That's the entry in the CT record of the units, so flight and squadron. If we open it again, you can go to units, doesn't matter which one in this case. And here you see that subtype is different. It's in this case 9 and not 7 as in the normal aircraft or vehicle type CT record for the aircraft. So you have to add both numbers for unit and for the aircraft itself. So let's continue. That one is a record we have just closed. It's the dogfight ID, so to speak. As said, you find them under art, dogfight, user IDs, and here we have defined the number. We are too far. There it is. In this case 21,501, and that's the number that you need to adhere. And we have the text IDS number. So we close that one. And the text IDS number was under main. Text IDS as shown before. That is this particular number that you have to add. So that's updated. And the last one is the icon number. The icon is essentially a separate topic. If you add a new aircraft and have no custom icon, you can of course use the icon for any other aircraft. So you can either look into this file and look what another aircraft that comes closest to your own aircraft, what number is used here, and alternatively it is also being done here in the units, because here you also define the icon, not in the CT record but in the unit itself. Here you define which unit icon is being used. This must match both in flight and squadron, and that's essentially also the number you have to enter here to get the appropriate icon shown up in the 2D user interface. So that's a little bit simplified. As I said, we now simply perform a check whether everything is working as intended. So the aircraft should now appropriately show up in tactical engagement mode. So we create a new TE mission. Add a flight. And we have this Spanish single seat added. Now you can check out the weapon loadouts and whether the model shows up appropriately. Texture, okay, both skin sets included. And it's always a good idea to check out the symmetry of the weapon loadouts. In this case, we have not updated all the pylons, so the loadout is not accurate yet as explained. But you generally have the weapons here. Yes, and that's it essentially, how to add an aircraft. The aspect that has not been covered but will be covered in a future video, because there are a lot of dependencies, the addition of external stations, station slots, and rec and BMS rec data. I have already briefly outlined this in the previous video. And as you can see, that's not too lengthy job to do. Of course, if you need to create a lot of things from scratch, and that's of course much more work. This is in this case just an example that is also applicable if you want to add an aircraft to a database that is not included in the database but that exists in another database, so in a different BMS version or for example different theater. That's the way how you proceed, generally spoken. Sounds would be a little bit more complex. Cockpit is described in part 8.0 of this BMS Modding tutorial series, and as said, on the Rex stations issue there will be a separate video yet to be done, but that's a principal process, and in the next videos I will also show you how you can add an aircraft to the instant action game mode and the dogfight mode. Okay, that's it for the time being. Hope this video was helpful to you. See you next time. Bye.